Luke 19:46, it said, "It is written, my house is the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." You have made it a den of thieves. So what was the problem happening in God's house that caused Jesus to be so offended? And then
Extortion?
Extortion.
Turn to his enterprise.
And we have just traveled outside the country, and we've had to deal with money changers. You ever had to deal with money changers? Oh man, it's just something's wrong with that system that you lose money going both ways. Both ways, they take a little percent out, and they come back, take a little percent out, and things can go this way and that way, and it's just like this. It's like leeches, just leeches. That's what they were doing in the temple. You couldn't get a sacrifice to sacrifice at the temple unless you purchased it in the temple coin. And people came from all over the world with their Greek coins or Roman coins, whatever coins they had. And when they came to the temple, they would have to exchange those for temple coin. And then with the temple coin, they could buy the sacrifice. And thus, in the changing of the money, they were just ripping people off left and right in the changing of the money.
Well, beyond that, beyond the extortion and the dishonesty, it said that this is what God is like. It told the worshipers, this is how God's government operates. This is how God behaves.
Right. So then doing that in God's house, where they were supposed to be learning about salvation, they're learning a very arbitrary system of rules and so forth. So what do we understand from the entire story? Christ going in and cleansing the temple, pulling out the whip, driving out the money changers, the whole thing. What do we understand is being taught there? And I thought, let's understand this through the lenses of the 7 levels. Let's look at what happened there and how do the different levels maybe describe this, what's going on. And so level 1, and everybody remember what level 1 is, reward and punishment. So as they see Christ pull out the whip and turn over the tables and drive people out, what's going on? Well, God's mad, and Christ is representing God, and he's punishing them. And this whip is there because they didn't do what God says. They didn't do what God says, so God's got to punish. Level 2, they broke their deal with God. They got off script. They forgot to do the rules as they agreed to do, and therefore, it's a moral duty on God's part that he inflict punishment.
And it's good to show righteous indignation.
There you go. Level 3, all nations recognize that the ruler of the nation has absolute power and is free to exercise that absolute power anytime that ruler wants. And Christ, as ruler of the temple, had the right to use his absolute power to put things the way he wants them. Level 4, they were breaking God's law, and breaking law requires punishment. Jesus, as the judge, is stepping in to judge them and inflict just punishment. Level 5, Jesus is overcome with love for the people. He understands human beings are in a terminal state of sin, and the temple was designed to be the teaching place to teach God's plan for healing and restoration. But the religious leaders were doing the opposite. They were making it harder for people to come to God for healing. Thus, Jesus revealed God's love. Love refuses to collude with lies and always seeks to free us from falsehood and lead us back to him for healing. Love, and I want you to note this, Christ never hit people with his whip. He hit the furniture. And his demeanor was such while he was doing it that the children stayed by. They didn't run away frightened. Now just imagine, Sabbath morning, somebody comes in, outraged at the misrepresentations of God that is going on, pulls out a whip, turns over the communion table up front and the podium, drives out the leaders of the church in such a way that the children are not frightened. You see, there's something profound happening in the way Christ conducted himself. And the children stayed by. Level 6, he contrasted God's law of love versus selfishness. The worldly system of selfishness was demonstrated by the money changers, and the resulted turmoil, anxiety, fear, stress, the division happening constantly. He drove them out and gave, and then, the whole story, he stayed by and gave freely of himself to heal and to restore. And not only did the children stay by, but the sick stayed by, and he started performing miracles. He started healing, and he started giving of himself to build up, demonstrating the two systems were completely different. And then level 7, understanding God's creation is built to operate upon love. and selfishness infects the hearts of human beings, breaking the design, resulting in death. Jesus used the object lesson of the temple, which, remember, destroy this temple, Jesus said, in 3 days I will build it up. The object lesson of the temple is an object lesson for the person, filled with the greed and the selfishness and the turmoil of what these people are doing is a metaphor for the human heart being filled with selfishness and fear. Okay, he used the metaphor of the temple, filled with greedy people, to demonstrate his purpose. His purpose, remember level 7, his purpose. What's his purpose? To cleanse humanity from that and restore the law of love in. And thus he drove out that evil, that selfishness, and he stayed by Christ central in the temple. Christ in me. It's no longer I that live, but Christ lives in me. And you see his purpose is to cleanse us from this. Unless we become conduits of a message that heals others as they come back to reconciliation with Christ. So with all that in mind, any comments before I read something out of Desire of Ages? Yes?
In the second time that Christ cleansed the temple, he then spent the next several days in the temple teaching.
Yes.
And he had to create a space where it was possible. That was possible.
And that space was created by marking a contrast between all the lies and the corrupt system and a different way. And they got their mind thinking. Yes, Wendell.
I appreciate very much this picture of God and that Christ, and when he cleansed the temple and that he did do healing and whatnot afterwards. Do we have any biblical evidence that occurred as we describe it?
Yes, it's actually, if you put all the passages together from the four Gospels, you will see that. I actually, in my book, The God-Shaped Brain, pull those texts together and show that when he drove out the money changers and stuff, that the children stayed by and he healed. But you have to get, the four Gospels give slightly different words here, just a little bit different way they describe it. Yes?
Yeah, I was thinking about the whip and how the children were drawn to Jesus, and yet I think as a child, if my parents pulled out a whip, I knew what was coming.
Yeah, even a belt, right? How many kids, when your parents pull out a belt, run to them?
But animals would respond to a whip.
Are you saying that we're
I'm talking about the sheep that he drove out. And
Okay, Joey, finish your point.
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering if Jesus, he could have revealed himself in his divinity, just a little bit of it, and it would have cleared the place, I would have thought, without a whip. I'm wondering if he used the whip to relate to the people who were at level 1, level 2, or level 3, so that they could relate to what he was trying to do, maybe.
But he also took the time to braid it. Can you braid?
I don't know if I don't know that. I'd like to know where you found that out. That he took the time to braid it. Pardon? Yeah.
it makes a noise that animals have been trained to respond to.
Yeah, the animals, but.
Well, he drove out the animals.
Okay.
You know, I know you've got scripture.
I see. So he's using it to drive the animals out, not the people out. Gotcha. Okay, I'm connecting with you finally here. Okay, thank you.
You know, I think Jesus didn't just walk in and do this. He had planned it. I think the children saw what he was doing and saw the object of his ire, and that way they were not afraid. In other words, they knew what he was going to do. They knew where he was going to take care of, and they weren't the ones that were going to get the end of that whip.
Yep. Yep.
I find it interesting that there's a tendency to be politically correct always. And this was, if you look at it from a political standpoint, this is one of the worst things Christ could have done to win the allegiance of the leaders. He's basically going and saying, going against them and basically setting it up where they're going to hate him more. So there's a place where right has to triumph, and you have to be politically correct.
And I want to intervene on that right now, because this is exactly right. How do you draw that line? Because what you just said are taken by people who have a very imperialistic law construct, have a system of rules where somebody else doesn't observe the rules the same way, and we must call sin by its right name, and we must go out there, and it doesn't matter if we're offensive. We'll put billboards up. Sunday is the mark of the beast. It doesn't matter because we're gonna just drive out those money changers from our society. Okay? Right. No, what's the difference?
Love.
Love is the difference, number one. And where do we draw those lines where we don't compromise? Design law. Yeah. We don't compromise with tobacco and say, you know what, it's okay, kids, if you smoke tobacco, it won't hurt you. It's all good. or drugs or whatever it is. It's design law stuff. And this was design law. They were actually infecting the minds of people with such distortions about God, it was destroying them. They were living in fear and terror. It was superstitious. They had so many superstitious beliefs. They believed that if you got into a body, a little fountain of water before anybody else, when the wind blew the water, it was an angel coming down. And if you got in fast, then you would get a miracle and get healed. Superstition. They were superstitious people. Their minds were completely corrupted with these types of ritualistic stuff. They couldn't even see God anymore. So this is where you take a stand on the truth, on on reality, how reality works.
Afraid of the fallout of that. That's what my point.
Yes, yes.
Isn't there something to be said about the condition of the money changers and the condition of the children? The money changers, when they're confronted with divinity, they're convicted in their own hearts and they flee.
Right,
the children, they're innocent children.
Right. So this is a metaphor also of what happens when Christ returns and reveals himself. Those whose hearts that are in unity with Christ, we love him. Those who don't are terrified of him. So this is out of Desire of Ages, page 161. It says, in the cleansing of the temple, Jesus was announcing his mission as the Messiah and entering upon his work. That temple, erected for the abode of the divine presence, was designed to be an object lesson for Israel and for the world. From eternal ages, it was God's purpose that every created being, from the bright and holy seraph to man, should be a temple for the indwelling of the Creator. Because of sin, humanity ceased to be a temple for God. Darkened and defiled by evil, the heart of man no longer revealed the glory of the Divine One. But by the incarnation of the Son of God, the purpose of heaven is fulfilled. God dwells in humanity, and through saving grace, the heart of man becomes again his temple. Are you following the metaphor here? That whole system, Old Testament sanctuary, Solomon's temple, Herod's rebuilt temple, it's only a metaphor for you, the person, to be a temple where God dwells. Let's keep going. God designed that the temple at Jerusalem should be a continual witness to the high destiny open to every soul. But the Jews had not understood the significance of the building they regarded with so much pride. They did not yield themselves as holy temples for the divine spirit. The courts of the temple at Jerusalem, filled with the tumult of unholy traffic, represented all too truly the temple of the heart, defiled by the presence of sensual passion and unholy thoughts. Now, Adventists particularly, get your mind around this next portion, because we have a cleansing of the sanctuary doctrine that is foundational to this organization. Get your this next sentence. In cleansing the temple from the world's buyers and sellers, Jesus announced his mission to cleanse the heart from the defilement of sin, from the earthly desires, the selfish lusts, the evil habits that corrupt the soul. The Lord, and then she quotes Malachi 3:1-3. Here's a quotation from Scripture. The Lord whom you seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant whom ye delight in. Behold, he comes, says the Lord of hosts. But who may abide the day of his coming? Who shall stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire, a fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. And he shall purify, which is another word for purify, cleanse the sons of Levi, or the Levites, and purge them as gold and silver. What's the lesson? What are we supposed to learn here? How does this connect to where we find ourselves in history? And let me just throw one more in really quick. This is out of Great Controversy 426. Because Adventists have this idea, Daniel 8:14, 2300 years, the sanctuary be cleansed. Listen to this. The coming of Christ as our high priest to the most holy place for the cleansing of the sanctuary brought to view in Daniel 8:14. The coming of the Son of Man to the Ancient of Days is presented in Daniel 7:13. And the coming of the Lord to his temple foretold by Malachi, I just read it in that other quote, are descriptions of the same event. You hearing that? In other words, do you have this view that before Christ comes, he's working to cleanse people, to restore hearts and minds, to bring us back into unity with him, to cleanse the spirit temple, to write the law in the heart and mind? Or do you have this view that there's some smoky room upstairs somewhere, books are being opened, records are being reviewed, legal pronouncements are being made?
The Bible is clear, your body is the temple of God.
So I put this in the notes, I bolded it out because I think I get a lot of questions from all over the world about what do you understand the investigative judgment to be? If you understand it through design law, then you understand it's a bidirectional investigation in this way. It requires that God is searching us, as David prayed, to find the wicked way in me and to create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. As a doctor searches to accurately diagnose and then prescribe and heal and restore. So God is investigating or searching us as we open our hearts and say, Lord, search me and find the wicked way in me. God is investigating us that he might create in us a clean heart and right spirit. Investigating our characters to accurately diagnose. But we are to be investigating the truth about him, to be won back to trust so that we will open the heart and allow him in order to be healed by the Spirit who takes what Christ achieved and reproduces it in us. And metaphorically speaking, we're going to talk in old symbols and metaphors, that process is the application of the blood to cleanse the temple. Or, if you want a more modern metaphor, it's eating the bread and drinking the wine at communion service. It's internalizing into your being. The bread is symbolic of the body or the word of Jesus Christ, that the truth of who he is taken into your mind, soul, character. And the wine is symbolic of his blood, which is his life, which we then become like him and live his principles and methods. We have the life of Christ in us, in our hearts and motives. That's we take in the knowledge of God, the truth of him, and we live the life of him, the bread and the wine. Symbolic. It's symbol of a reality of an experience. Yes?
I think it's really cool the way the two experiences tie together. That experience where Jesus said, you have to eat of my
John 6, unless you eat my flesh, drink my blood, you have no part with me. Yes.
Taking that in. Back to the garden when God said, don't eat of the tree. He wasn't talking about the fruit. He was saying, don't take that into your being. Don't eat of what you're going to hear there. Don't let that become who you are.
Primarily, that's right, because the thing that really corrupted them was believing the lies, which then led to the taking of the actual physical fruit. Yeah. Well done. What's that?